Every year in March, Side Effects hosts a competition called Mardini, and they give you a different node every day that you have to use in your artwork. And you can either create an animation or a still image. This year, I was able to enter into day 4. I only had about an hour to work on this project, but I created this project called Life in Color. And I wanted to step through kind of the more interesting parts of the project here. So let's go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to just take a look at the plant first. Just kind of take a look here. So if I look into our node tree here, we got 2 little out nodes here. One is going to be the animated version, one is the non-animated version. The basis of this is going to be a spiral that I'm then piping into a carve node, which is animated. As I go along in our timeline here, you see that it's being animated in our U, and then that's just being swept along, which just gives us this little animation that we got there. So I'm also creating the tendrils basically the same way. I'm just creating some points on this bottom half of the sphere, and then we're just copying 2 points there with some random p-scale, which gives us this, and that's all just being piped together with our object here. So this is our cross section, just a circle that I've ran through a reverse node and then gave it some point jitter. And I wanted to smooth that out a little bit, so I resampled it and then I oriented it the right way for our sweep, and then just our simple little setup here in order to get our objects inside. And we're just randomizing the p-scale as well as the color, which I didn't actually end up using, but altogether this gives us our object. And then from inside our scatter here, if I dive in here, pretty simple. I just have a grid which I'm copying some points onto, or scattering some points onto, giving some random p-scale and then a random orientation. So you want to use the copy to points with a random orientation, you need to set the attribute name to orient and make sure it's got 4 dimensions because it is a 4-dimension attribute inside of Houdini. Well, let's go ahead, take a look at our animation. So for our final thing here, got some interesting stuff going on inside here. This is just the assembly of our scene. Let's go ahead and take a look at our object here. So everything's kind of black to start off. If I reset this as a display, see everything's black, and that's because I have an animation of our materials going across, which is kind of the basis of this Life in Color. I wanted to kind of give it a little bit of a story type element to it. So the way that I am going to achieve the materials coming on is through these color nodes as well as these groups and attributes here. So every one of these color nodes before the groups is set to a black color. So that's because I want them all to basically be saying that there's no mask being displayed. And then in this sphere here, if I take a look at this, it starts out small, and as I go along it gets bigger to eventually encapsulate the majority of our scene. I'm giving that a white color just to basically transfer that attribute later on. So this is getting piped into our group here. So let's take a look at the grid so it's easier to see what's going on here. So I just have the group set to points and then a bounding box or a bounding object, which is our sphere here. And you can see as the sphere grows, it's starting to add more points to this group. And then we're growing into an attribute wrangle here. And so this is going to be assigning the color, basically the mask of our material. So we'll take a look at the shader here in a second, but pretty simple attribute wrangle here. We just have our group within an if statement. So if our group is basically anything other than 0, which it's going to be either 0 or 1, if it's included in the group, so everything that you see is that's white is going to be 1, everything that's black is 0. So we're checking for that, and if it's 1, then we want to set the color to 1, in our object. And actually, we don't actually need that. I was actually going to use that for a attribute transfer at first, but I decided to go this route instead, just a little bit easier. And then if I take a look at our material here, so for our ground, basically all these are the same, but I basically just have a ramp here, which is covering the opacity, but I have our material, which is being piped into a material blender. And then I'm looking up the color attribute, which is what we had assigned in our attribute wrangle. And that's basically just our mask. And then I have just a simple gray material piped into the base color, and we're using the color as our blend. And you can see as it grows here, that is basically where our mask is showing up and where our material is being blended between. And if I look at all of these, they all have the same thing going on. That's how I was getting in between those, except for the bulb and the points that were inside. Actually, I did use it for the points as well. Just the bulb, which was a glass bulb. Pretty simple setup there. If I look at the bulb, it's just simply set to the glass preset, nothing special there, but the blending the material is a pretty simple way to do it if you're looking to just kind of blend between some grayscale or just two materials in general. You can use this sort of an effect to, or this sort of a setup to achieve that effect, I should say. It's not too difficult, pretty simple, just some group nodes, assigning some colors, and using that as a mask. But that was the gist of my life. Lots of interesting Mardini entries going on and every day and across the animation and the stills. So make sure you guys take a look at all of the entries, all of the winners, not even just the winners, because there's a lot of people that haven't won that if I would have been choosing would have chose some other artwork. So there's a lot of really good entries going on in here. So make sure you guys take a look at all the different entries for each day. They are on the Side Effects forums. If you don't know where to find that, I'll leave a link to the forums down in the description so you can check that out. But anyways, I have a bunch of other videos on my channel going over a bunch of other stuff inside of Houdini, as well as Cinema 4D, Redshift, and some stuff on Clarice as well. So if you're interested in any of that, make sure you guys check that out. But anyways, thank you guys for watching and have a good day.